Thanks very much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on the program.
My pleasure.
Okay, so let's start with that story that we've just done now. Balekambete is consulting with the ANC Chief Whip, Jackson Mthembu, and Cyril Ramaphosa, the person responsible for government business. What does that mean if they're talking about moving forward this motion of no confidence? Does it give us any indication about what might be happening inside the NEC?
I don't think so, because the NEC is on lockdown from 2 o'clock this afternoon. Cell phones in envelopes, everybody locked in a room discussing. So if they're consulting, maybe it's in tea times and things like that. But I think it's an indication that she heard the opposition parties, but she's not necessarily going to move there, because I'm still of the opinion that a motion of no confidence is probably the last move the ANC will make, because the political costs involved in a motion of no confidence of the ANC in its own leader. It's extremely costly to do that in terms of face saving and those kind of things. The first price still is President Zuma resigning. That's the first price, and I guess that's why for the whole day we don't hear anything, because they're still discussing it.
If President Zuma doesn't resign, then they do have to do the vote of no confidence. So in effect, what that would mean is that President Zuma is essentially calling their bluff and saying, do what you have to do. I don't care what happens to the party.
Absolutely. He's playing a game almost like, was it Samson in the Bible, pulling the building on the crowd and himself. And that would be very detrimental to the ANC itself. That's why I'm arguing that from the viewpoint of the ANC itself, they'll have to do everything to get Zuma to resign out of his own will. You know, sometimes you're pushed, sometimes, like in the case of Mugabe, you're forced, and then you kind of act as if it's a very dignified exit. That's how it would look.
Would President Zuma actually do that, force the party down this perilous path? This is a party that he's belonged to his entire life, that he went to jail for, that he put his life on the line for. You know, those colours mean something to him. Would he be prepared to jeopardize the party in such a catastrophic way?
No, I don't think so. I think what we're seeing here is, let's call it politics on the knife's edge. In other words, it's you used the term earlier on calling bluff, power play, all kinds of moves. Of course, it's a very internalized, it's almost like coalition politics inside the ANC. That's almost a contradiction. But that's what they're busy with at the moment, to get some form of exit. Now, we're not exactly sure what those arguments are. The newspapers are speculating, the social media are speculating, but it seems to me everything has to do with, once he's out, he's out. And I think part of it is not Zuma only. I think the Zuma faction, if we want to call it that, is also pushing back, because as soon as Ramaphosa takes over as president, within a week or two, definitely before the end of February, we'll see a major cabinet reshuffle. Some people will have jobs, some people won't have jobs. So I think it's not only Zuma that is pushing back, I think it's the whole Zuma faction.
And that's now for selfish interest, isn't it? It's no longer about what's good for the country,
politics
what's good
of
for
the
party.
stomach. Politics of the stomach, they call it.
And this is what's playing out at the NEC right now.
Yeah.
The clock is ticking. And I asked Professor Siposiepe earlier on, and perhaps get your take, just how much time does the ANC really have to resolve this once and for all?
I think they've got time. The expectation that was created yesterday was today is kind of D-Day by Ramaphosa himself. If I look at all the different kinds of stakeholders acting into this process, you will see that the media is almost in a frenzy to get an answer. The supporters of Ramaphosa in WhatsApp groups and social media are pushing. The unions are pushing. The SABC is pushing. The only guys that aren't pushing are the corporate guys, because they know getting a transition from one leader to another takes some time, and you need to take dead aim on how you're doing it, because if you rush it now, you're going to pay a price later on. So I would give them another day or two if they want that, but to evade a motion of no confidence, because a motion of no confidence, I still maintain, is the political price, the cost is going to be tremendous to the ANC, and it's going to break down the whole ANC.
I still want to understand what that political cost is, because, you know, again, if I'm a lay person, I'm sitting at home and I'm watching this and I'm just thinking, isn't it just about doing the right thing? Surely, if everybody had a conscience and everybody thought things through properly and just do the right thing, what cost could there be to that?
Yeah, that is very nicely put, but politics is all about power, and it's almost the business of politics is power trading. They trade in power. Now, if there's a motion of no confidence, the ANC would probably need the opposition parties to get it through in terms of the numbers. Now, just guess what the political parties, the opposition parties, would do in the next election. They're going to say, if it wasn't for us, you would not have been here today. That's part of the political cost. So the ANC then presents almost political support to the opposition parties on a plate, which of course will happen if they don't get their act together. And that's part of the political cost. The other part of political cost is they will now put on the table the fact that the factions have so entrenched themselves that the ANC, as the party that we saw 23, 24 years ago, taking over this political transition, this democratic project, is now falling apart.
What could President Zuma be bringing to the table that they need to negotiate so carefully with him over?
Everybody's speculating. I think there are 3 or 4 things. There's definitely the interests of his region, KZN. We know after the national conference, the elective conference, there's not a single representative of KZN in the top 6. In other words, there's definitely that issue, depending on how they're negotiating it. It is definitely what would happen to him once he's out, his legal costs, all those kind of things. There's definitely the sustaining of his extended family, which is larger than what legislation allows, more wives than we thought, and all those kind of things. And I think there's also this position of what would become of him later on. What role would he play? And how would he exit? And with what kind of dignity? You'll remember that Ramaphosa used the terms yesterday, or in the caucus it's reported that he said, I want Zuma to leave by the front door and not by the back door. And I think part of this negotiations is, how do we design the front door?
You said KZN, his region, but we know that this region is split. Couldn't the king step up and speak to his subjects and say, this is what I want our subjects to do, and sort this out?
I think the king already played a role over the last 2 weeks. And you're right, that region came to the conference divided. We remember the court case. But I think the moment the election results were published in, I think it was the 18th or the 19th of December, suddenly KZN realized we're nowhere. We played this game with such high stakes that we now have got nothing. Not NDZ, Dlamini Zuma, nor Senzo Nchunu, nobody. And I think that brought the different factions in KZN a little bit closer, saying we need to get our act together, because by falling or by gaming and having this power game internally, we lost out. Mm-hmm. And I think something changed in KZN since December up to now.
If Jacob Zuma disappears, is he gone, or will his influence somehow still be felt through the organization?
No, he will stay with us for a very long time. He will stay with us for some of the good he did, like the Age project and so on, but he will definitely stay with us for as long as the state capture investigation goes on. He will stay with us for as long as his court cases linger on. He's got the ability to stretch those things to the absolute maximum. So yeah, he will be with us for a long time. And he will always be a reference of what it is to have a bad governance. Challenged by corruption and a few other things. I think in that sense, he will always be a reference point of what not to do in future, and also a lesson for the ANC. There's a very important lesson in this. It seems to me ANC succession is not well designed. When you have this conference 18 months before an election, you have almost as a given 2 centers of power, unless it's between 2 terms, like we saw at Mangaung. There was no such problem then. But it seems to me the ANC will either have to move their conferences closer to elections, or develop something which is happening for the second time, and that is once the conference is over and you have got a new president of the party, the existing or the sitting or the incumbent must actually resign out of free will. And that then gives the new guy 10 years, because what's happening at the moment may just as well happen to Cyril Ramaphosa in 10 years' time or 8 years' time. And I think that's why the negotiations are so sensitive at the moment, because he may be actually looking in a mirror when he is 75 years old.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Theo Venter, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your insights this evening.